Gorn, 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 we're finally gonna see the Gorn. Gorn, 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 we're gonna see the Gorn. What? Well, that can't be right. Let's take a look and... Aw, man, no Gorn in this episode. Strange New Worlds. Episode review. Hey, all you cats and kittens. Is that a dated reference? I can't even tell anymore. Anyways, we're back at it again. Star Trek Strange New Worlds, Season 1, plowing along strong, all the way up to Episode 4 already, entitled Memento Mori. And there will be tons of spoilers ahead, so sit back and relax. Brief rundown of what this episode is about. We start off with our main protagonist, Vala Maldoran, who is abducted by one of the leaders of the Trust Conspiracy, who uses a brutal machine to dredge up traumatic memories of her time as a Goa'uld host. Absolutely nobody just informed me that that's actually the description for the Stargate SG-1 episode, Memento Mori, and we're talking about the Star Trek version, so we start off on the USS Enterprise. That's right. Our main character this time is actually Laan Noonien Singh. It's kind of hard to say those names that have the apostrophe in the middle of them, so apologies for not putting the stop on it correctly if I ever screw that up. But she starts off with her log. It's Stardate 3177.3. It's security officer's log if you're one of those people that are into the Stardates. And we have this nice beauty shot of the Enterprise here before we cut to her quarters and find out we are celebrating Starfleet Remembrance Day. I guess it came at a good time since the United States Memorial Day is coming up in a couple of days here. And the point of this is to basically acknowledge, celebrate, honor those who have lost their lives in service to Starfleet, and those who served with them wear the name of the ship or possibly the starbase or whatever that person served on in honor of that individual or those individuals. We find out here the name of Laan's colony ship, the SS Puget Sound. Two things. If you watch my last video on my hypothesis, my theory on what's going on with Laan, there is a possibility that I get 1 point of credit here and 1 down point of non-credit because the SS Puget Sound, a sound very similar to a bay, conship the SS Botany Bay. Obviously, I think there's a correlation there, whether or not it's just the writers throwing that in to, pay tribute. The downside is we are shown here that this is a UFP, United Federation of Planets ship, and obviously Khan was not around in the 90s to be part of the Federation, so unless there's more subterfuge going on, which could obviously be the case, my theory may be slightly tweaked from what I was thinking. Also, the fact that we saw Laan later on was saved as a kid, not her current age, that's beside the point. Anyways, she is finding it a little troublesome. She doesn't really want to put this pin on. She kind of wants to push down, tamp down that past and let it go. She doesn't want to remember the horrors of her past. I don't blame her. Obviously, that's not the most healthy thing, probably, and we will find out a little later on that it does come back to haunt her. But for the time being, we cut now to our second pair of characters, Hemmer and Uhura. Uhura is now doing her cadet rotation. She's taking on her engineering duties as she kind of goes through. The plan of the episode, at least that's what their current mission is, to deliver an atmospheric processor upgrade to the planet Phoenibus 3. Otherwise, their air will become unbreathable. Hemmer here is questioning her on what actually is done. She gives the answer, well, it filters the air. He's like, oh, great, cadets don't do the research. Then she proceeds to give a complete history that it was invented by Zigwell Orgon. It was first used on Titan, blah, blah, blah. Kind of seems to almost impress Hemmer for a moment. So, way to break through that crotchety skin. Anyways, that will be the second pair in this episode. Going to take a break right now. It seems like what they're doing is they're going back to the old style of Star Trek where there's an A story, a B story. This episode ramps it up to a C story and even a D story later on. I think that was a little overboard. While I did like this episode overall, I think they had too much going on. If they had pared it back down a little bit, made it a little tighter, I think it could have been much more of a perfect episode. Our next group here, back on the bridge, Laan and Una talking about Remembrance Day briefly before we're interrupted by the arrival at the planet where we discover there's no communication satellite and no sign of life forms, at least sentient life forms on the planet. I do love this little panel here where you see the name of the planet with some features of it, the atmosphere, the size, a bunch of different data on the planet. I love that. It reminds me of scanning planets in Mass Effect, and I, for one, think Mass Effect would make a perfect platform for a Star Trek game. If you just take the Mass Effect formula, throw on Star Trek stuff, I think that could be a perfect version of a Star Trek game in the Prime universe. I know they would probably want to set it in the JJ universe, but please, if you're going to make this, set it in normal Prime Star Trek, even if you don't have us use the characters. I digress. The landing party goes down to try and figure out what the hell happened to the colonists. They also discovered that the satellite had been destroyed, but they don't know if it was a natural accident or if it was malicious. So on the planet, it's pretty obvious right away that there has been some attack. There's been some fire, some shots, some dead, but no sign of bodies. You can see here there's some wreckage and there's some blood trails all leading to a central point. There's no bodies left. Why is that? What's going on? That's the mystery that they're trying to figure out. And basically what happens is immediately the Enterprise is approached by a vessel. It's a human, well, they aren't human, the colonist vessel, and there's only about 100 people on this. It's a refugee ship, for lack of a better way to think of it, but it used to be a mining ship, which means it's got radiation shields for hauling ore, which make it impossible to beam out of the ship. They will have to do it the old-fashioned way, dock with the Enterprise in a sweet callback to, I believe the last time we saw something like this was in Enterprise. If it happened in Discovery, you'll forgive me for forgetting that, but I like this. I like the concept that ships can dock this way and transporters aren't the obvious choice all the time. So that was a fun thing to see, and it leads to a great thing later on. Then we meet this girl. She's one of the refugees. I will take a moment now to say, please get attached to her. It won't destroy you if you get attached to her really quickly. She's going to live a nice long life. She remembers what happens, says that monsters attacked them. She heard a clicking noise that sounded roughly to me like a turn signal. She was doing, don't know if you can hear that in my mic, but then she goes, chitters a little bit. La'an's like, oh my God, there's some stuff going on and it's not going to end well. Suddenly, she contacts the ship and says, oh crap, scan for some cloaked whatever. Yeah, not cloaked, but hidden whatchamacallits. Spock does the sensor thing, and oh my God, there's a slight optical distortion behind the moon. And before you can, even react, the thing comes out of nowhere and starts pew, 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 just nailing the Enterprise. Unfortunately, because they're docked the old-fashioned way, they can't put up their shields, and this unidentified ship, just pummels them. Does some significant damage, blows the ship that they're docked against. It does some damage to, I think we find out, the cargo bay, sick bay, as well as sick bay's stores. Nice to have a mention of stores again. Putting this face here, this is a face that La'an hallucinates throughout the episode, kind of like Rafi was doing with Elnor all season in Picard, except we get a payoff for that. Isn't it nice to have a payoff to something? Okay, we come back from the opening credits and find out the mother and the little girl who I just told you to get very attached to are dead. They didn't make it, so that was probably a poor choice on my part. Sorry about that. And the ship, pretty damaged. Una, pretty damaged. Luckily, they appear to be just outside of sickbay because we see in the background Nurse Chapel and some other draftees into the medical corps or whatever. They activated all staff, are evacuating people out of the corridor into the sickbay right behind them. So kind of lucky they were there when this happened. She's hurt. She says she's fine. Tells La'an to go up to the bridge. She's told the captain that this is the Gorn. Now, Ike, very reticent, doesn't believe it's the Gorn because, and this is a great callback to continuity from TOS, assuming it's the correct same universe. It's like nobody's ever seen the Gorn. We've heard of them through passing. They've made a couple incursions into our territory. They're very rarely seen. Nobody's ever seen one in person. How can we be sure it's them? And La'an's like, I've seen one in person. There's been others that have seen one in person. They just die. They don't survive long enough to tell about it. This is absolutely the Gorn. This is their tactic. They used the ship as bait to lure you in so that they can use you all for food as part of their hunt. Pike's like, well, that's actually a pretty damn good tactic. And then we decide we need to get the hell out of Dodge. Instead of staying to fight, we need to escape. Retreat, get the shields up as fast as possible, get the hell out of Dodge. Unfortunately, the nacelle is damaged. All they can manage is impulse, and they need to hide. That's very much is reminiscent of the Wrath of Khan sort of thing, where they're trying to hide in a nearby brown dwarf, I believe they said, reminiscent of a gas giant. So they're going to hide in the gravity well of a brown dwarf, similar to hiding in a nebula, where sensors are not going to work, and communications are not going to work, and shields also not going to work very well. They're going to have to be very low on power. Then we cut back to our subplot of Uhura and Hemmer in engineering. They're broken, or they're trapped. That's also where the atmospheric processor is. It's going critical. If they get above a certain temperature point, it's going to blow up in an atomic explosion that destroys the ship. Now, I will stop here. This entire episode seems very, very similar to Damages. Can't remember the name of the episode from TNG where the ship is damaged. Troy's stuck on the bridge with, I think, O'Brien and what's her name? Rolaren. Picard is stuck in the turbo lift with the children. Sick bay, or no, 10 forward is Worf and Keiko giving birth. There's a whole bunch of different sections of the ship that are trapped off from one another, and I think that's what they're trying to do here. Geordi and what's her name? Dr. Beverly Crusher are trapped in the cargo bay, and they end up having to vent it. So very similar circumstances going on in this episode. I don't know if it's a direct reference to it, but it's very similar to me. Hemmer broke his hand. So he's blind, has a broken hand. He's the only one with these smarts to do what he needs to do. So obviously he is going to need to communicate through Uhura to do the job. One thing I'm not sure about, aren't Ainar's telepathic? Couldn't he technically beam the directions into her mind? I'm not entirely sure how they work. I haven't watched the episode of Enterprise with them in a while, but I feel like they were. Maybe not. Maybe not all of them are. Maybe it's just the females. I can't recall. Anyways, this is broken. It's going to be up to Uhura to fix it with his guidance. He says he doesn't work well with the team. He's going to need to change. Back in sickbay, the other side plot, Una, gravely injured, a lot worse than she let on. They're going to need to do archaic surgery. What was the quote? I think Mbenga said something along the lines to Chapel. Aren't you well versed in archaeological surgery? I feel like he might have said archaic, but anyways, he basically meant that they're going to have to do normal 21st century surgery. They're going to have to sew her up. They're going to give her stitches. They're going to give her a blood transfusion with an IV, all that stuff. I guess it's a fun reference to everything in Star Trek from our time was called ancient, the ancient West and things like that. Now they have the little briefing room where La'an fills us in more on the Gorn experience that she had. Basically tells them, no, they're monsters. They're bloodthirsty jerks. All they do is they look at us as food. All we are is a hunt to them. We're prey. In essence, we're prey. They don't give a crap about us. I like this scene. As they're leaving, Pike's like, dude, what's the deal? You got to chill out here. I know that you've had a bad situation, but you're projecting something to the crew that's keeping the crew on edge. You need to chill out and be a more superior type of officer. You need to project hope. That's your job. I like this. I like the scene of Pike basically, this is what you need to do. I also liked earlier when they said we have to fly into the brown dwarf and it's not going to go well for us, where what's her name, Ortegas, didn't seem to be okay with that. She was a little reticent, like, yeah, doesn't seem like a great option. But as soon as he said, take us in full impulse, she said, aye, sir, and did it. There was no questioning of his orders. There was just chain of command. Captain gives an order. I'm doing it. I don't like it. I may let him know that I don't like this, but at least she's taking the directive, taking the order. Then we go back. Obviously, I talked earlier, Uhura, I'm going to skip through this a lot because there's a lot of cutting back and forth. There's a lot of story going on. Then Spock devises a way to basically turn the compass into a radar. So he has found a way to detect the Gorn ship, even though they can't use sensors. Kind of, it seems more like sonar to me, but as was pointed out in Discovery, there's no sound in space, so therefore there can't be sonar in space. Very, very poignant way to say that, but the way it looks here, it kind of seems like they're trying to do a submarine feel. So sonar would be more of an apt description for what's actually going on. So they have one torpedo left. The guidance system won't work, so they're basically deploying it as a depth charge on the Gorn ship. Works out great, blows the ship up. They're like, boom, did it, out of dodge, when suddenly a spring, man, I was going to make such a cool word, a trap is sprung. 3 Gorn ships appear on the sonar radar display. One is huge. Basically, what happened is they were using their main original ship as bait. They sacrificed their entire ship just to get the location of the USS Enterprise so that they could continue their hunt in the brown dwarf. Oh crap, that was a good plan if you're a Gorn. If you're a human, not so much. Now, Pike comes up with a plan, and I'm going to go ahead and say right now, I believe this is a reference back to his feeling of invincibility because he knows he's got a date with Destiny in 10 years where he's taking more reckless actions than necessarily would have normally been done. So he basically says, well, I have faith in the Enterprise that she's not going to blow up. I think the Gorn ships will. So I will take us in as close as possible, evacuate everything from below deck 20 because it's going to be crushed by the pressure of space. And be damned, because our ship will survive. They won't. They will be crushed. I think we're going to be good. I think this is more of the brazenness that he's showing because he knows he can't die. Now, does that mean the rest of the ship can't die? No. But I think he's feeling more invincible because he has that date with Destiny, and he's still feeling a bit detached from reality due to that. Just my own headcanon. So we see here Una is basically full of shrapnel, not doing too great. They're doing surgery. They have 1 vial of plasma left to transfuse her with. And then we find out there's another officer that needs it. She basically says, give it to her. I'll take what you got. And then immediately takes the gas to knock herself out. So they can't argue with her. They can't contradict her order. That's also great. I kind of like that too. Back to engineering or cargo bay, we've got the Hammer and Uhura back and forth. I like it. They work well together. Again, I'm going to skip forward because it's not, it's basically a one-note thing. It doesn't really warrant that much discussion. During the evacuation of the lower decks, this guy trips and falls. Ensign Kyle picks him up. The transporter guy picks him up, helps him. They can't quite make it, so this guy shoves Kyle through. The doors close on him. Right as the doors close, we see an explosion, and he's blasted into space, presumably dead. In the very next scene, Pike gets a call that they have lost 1 officer, so we know he actually did die. He didn't make it, and that is part of the, whatchamacallit, I guess, the not the benefits, the opposite of that. The decision that Pike made led to this guy's death. So I'm wondering if that's going to weigh on him going forward, and he'll realize he's not, even though he's invincible, his decisions are impacting others. Second ship down. The second Gorn ship cannot take the pressure and they implode. Hooray. Got 2 left to deal with. Then I just wanted to point this out. Nurse Chapel says this brilliant line here about how the pain of Una's surgery is going to feel like giving birth out of your mouth. I do like how Una called her out. She's like, who the hell says something like that? And Nurse Chapel's just like, I do. I don't know. It was a weird thing to say. And then Una gives away her plasma, as I mentioned earlier. Then we have a scene here. So I both like and dislike this. For the second time in a row in this season, they're using their shuttlecraft to get out of a situation. Love it. I love that they remember they have a shuttlecraft. What I don't like is they're basically, in both cases, they're using their shuttlecraft in such a way that it's just like this undetectable thing the enemy doesn't know is there. This time it kind of makes sense because they don't have sensors. They're, lost in this gas cloud. But it seems like if they keep using the shuttles in this way, it's going to make it seem like they're cloaked and they're invulnerable and impenetrable. I don't know. It just seems like, yes, it's great that they're using the shuttles, but it's not great that they're just using them in such a impervious manner, if that makes sense. A close-up of this shot, the SS Puget sound, as I mentioned earlier. This is coming into play in a moment because Spock decides, or La'an asks Spock to mind meld with her to uncover what's been going on in her mind, in her memory about the Gorn encounter she had before. She's getting flashes, but doesn't really remember. Is that true? Is she blocking it out? I don't know. So we got this nice scene of her as a child, this guy who she's been seeing throughout the episode, her brother. They were on the Gorn planet being chased by the Gorn, and he basically sacrifices himself for her, gives her this little notebook he had been keeping where he worked out some sort of light communication. So there had been flashes of light going back and forth between Gorn ships. He worked out that this was some form of communication and worked out what it meant. Gives her the book, which, if this doesn't speak to somebody who's extra brilliant, maybe has genetically enhanced powers, I don't know what does, because how could someone just come up with that while under constant threat of death on a Gorn breeding world? I don't know. Seems a bit suspicious. That's what we learn. They take that to use later. Then we have a little reversal of the mind meld where La'an kind of sees into Spock's mind and is like, oh crap, you lost a sibling too. Michael Burnham, who the hell is that? She's not in Starfleet records. And we get this little narration of back from Discovery when they said goodbye, and Spock basically says, yeah, we're done here. Get out. We're getting out of my mind. We're done. We're not talking about her ever again. So boo for a reference to something that's supposed to be classified again, but it wasn't done in a terrible way, so I can kind of let it slide. Back to the shuttle, they apply their light technology, send a message to one of the Gorn ships basically saying, hey, we've been infiltrated by the humans, so you kind of need to help. So the other ship, boom, 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 blows them out of the sky. Gorn ship 3, down for the count. Now we're just left with a big boy. How are we going to get out of this one? So, turns out the brown dwarf being eaten up by a black hole currently. Spock basically says it's possible to slingshot us around this. In theory, Pike tells him to do it. He's not so confident, but basically says if we're perfect, we can do it. Kind of similar probably to the slingshot maneuver around the sun to go back in time. Obviously, we know Spock can do those calculations, so probably a pretty safe bet he'll figure us out here with Ortegas' help, because she is navigating them. So then we see here that they're trying this. Pike comes up with this plan, basically using redshift to freeze the moment. So basically what it's happening is if you get close enough to the accretion disk, the event horizon of the black hole, it's going to basically show up to any outside observer as if you're at a standstill. So their plan is to use the redshift, stop right on the edge of the disk, eject the project from cargo bay, which is about to go critical anyways, to cause an explosion overlaid where the ship is frozen in time and escape out. I don't know if they're using warp or impulse to get out. So it looks like the ship was destroyed. Kind of similar to the Picard maneuver. They said here that they're going to call it the Pike maneuver if it works out. Well, they do it. They vent the cargo bay. Damn, there's so many bays. I keep wanting to say the wrong one. They strap in. Uhura almost breaks out. Hemmer catches her, kind of reminiscent of that scene from TNG, like I said, where they're venting cargo bay with LaForge and Beverly. Obviously, they make it. It's a tense scene. They didn't think they made it quite yet. We see this actually really cool, beautiful shot of an explosion. Fourth Gorn ship is deterred, turns and flies away, and then we see our triumphant Enterprise fly off. Then we have this very poignant scene at the end where Pike is giving his thoughts, saying, we lost 7 crew members. I don't remember how many colonists he said. I think 4. So 7 crew members, 4 colonists, not to mention the entire rest of the colony that was presumably all dead, but possibly taken prisoner in the similar manner to how they had been taken prisoner from the where La'an's people were. So are they still alive and being used as food and breeding sacks on the Gorn ship? Ugh. I really hope not. Hopefully they're on one of the ships that got destroyed. Otherwise, we're just kind of letting them go with the colonists, and I don't like the thought of that unless it's going to come back later, in which case, Pike gives this touching speech. La'an kind of has dealt with her trauma a little more. So overall, I think it was a fun episode. A little slow in places, even though they packed in 4 brands of stories. I think if they excised one of those side stories, tightened up the editing of the overall feel of the episode a little bit, it could have been a slightly better paced episode. Not throwing too much shade at it, it had very, very much Shades of Damage, as well as Wrath of Khan, kind of a cross between the submarine battle and a ship that's damaged, different areas doing different things. I liked the interaction between the crew members. I think that the Una storyline, the sickbay Una storyline, didn't really result in much, aside from giving her and the medical staff something to do. If we excised that story completely, cut out those 5 or 6 minutes, tightened up the editing with everything else, fit it into a normal 45-minute commercial episode of television, I think this would have been almost a perfect Strange New Worlds episode. Not a perfect TV show, a perfect episode of Strange New Worlds so far as what we've seen 4 episodes deep. That being said, cramming in the extra side plot with the pacing stretched it out a bit more than needed to be. Also, and this is a biggie, what the hell happened to the dog on the planet? They encountered a dog, then they were emergency beamed back up to the ship, and then the Enterprise left. What is going on with the dog? Or is it like a Turkalian Rottweiler? I don't know what it is. Is the dog still trapped in that building? Are you not going to go back and rescue that dog? That is my biggest down for this episode. What happened to that damn dog? Overall, I think it was fun. I think it was dark, but not in a necessarily bad way. I think most of the characters acted well. There was a couple phrases and comments on things that sounded more modern. I'm just going to have to live with the way that they're going to write that. I still think Pike is dealing with something, and I hope he gets over his malaise for his future shortcomings soon, because I want to see him pump up that charisma a little more, come back to be a more confident captain. I still think he's dealing with the haze of his future situation. If we can deal with that, get it over with soon, I think he'll become a much better character, a little more resolute in his decisions, and I think we'll be on a great track. But overall, I enjoyed this episode. I thought it was better than the previous episode, and pacing aside, side stories that kind of dragged us down a little, I think it made for the best episode individually we have seen thus far of SNW. So until next time, where's the dog? Computer and program.